All right, well, we are all gearing up for that big bilateral meeting between the Prime Minister and United States President Donald J. Trump. Of course, what is going to be discussed, what is going to be achieved and concluded or negotiated is a mystery so far, but all we can do is come up with intelligent conjectures on the back of what has transpired in the last few days. We know that Donald Trump is intent on making America great again. We also know that Donald Trump is intent on imposing tariffs which are pretty high when it comes to the BRICS nation. He was upset that the de-dollarization concept was being considered by the BRICS nation. We are also aware that Donald Trump wants to stop the Ukraine-Russia war. He also wants to turn in Gaza into a tourist spot. So, of course, a lot of fiction which has been merged with reality. And the Prime Minister has, of course, as we know, landed in Washington, D.C. for this highly anticipated meeting with US President Donald Trump. This meeting, which will be the first one between both the leaders, is expected to set the agenda for the next 4 years at least. Prime Minister Modi will also meet Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk, who was very impressed with the Prime Minister the last time they had this meeting. Vivek Ramaswamy, who was part of Doge and resigned later on, will also be meeting with the Prime Minister. Mike Waltz is also in queue. So what is it that makes this visit important for India? It obviously comes at the backdrop of Donald Trump's push to deport 20,000 illegal immigrants for India. While India has supported Trump's stance, the humane return of the deportees is something that will be on the agenda. Another important issue is trade after Trump has imposed tariffs on steel and aluminium imports. Donald Trump has also expressed his desire to sell defense equipment and products to India, which would be crucial for India's defense modernization. And let's also not forget that this comes as Trump administration is cracking down on US aid and also on George Soros and his network. Before this visit, the Prime Minister had met with the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and US Vice President J.D. Vance and discussed investments in nuclear energy and also artificial intelligence. So what can be expected from this big meet? What is going to be the conclusion? Is India going to hold its own like we have done for so long, or are there going to be some pain points? That's exactly what we're going to discuss with our guests for the next few hours. We'll in fact will be running up to that important meeting, which is going to be happening early morning on the 14th of Feb. Mr. Manga Anant Mula, politician, Republican Party, is joining us on the show. Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, former diplomat, is also with us. Major General Rajan Kochar, defense expert, joins us on the show. Mr. Adrian Calamil, fellow at the Arabian Peninsula Institute, is with us on the broadcast as well. Dr. Sharad Kohli, senior economist, with us on the show. Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, is joining us on this all-important discussion. Anand Mittal, former director of Senator Mitch McConnell's office and former Capitol Hill staffer, is also joining us on the program. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking out the time. Professor Nalapat, sir, I'll begin with you. I want you to set the tone for what's about to happen in a few hours. Like I said in my opening monologue, sir, will India continue to hold its own? Something that we have done, something that we have become proficient in, and something that the world has acknowledged us for, that our diplomacy, could be friendly, yet it is independent. But Donald Trump has something else on the agenda. He's also, in fact, announced very, very recently that he's, in fact, going to be focusing on reciprocal tariffs, which are committed to make America great again. And of course, this is a trade war with a number of nations. Will India also be, caught up in these tentacles?
Look, Vineet, the fact is that the President of the United States has got a basket of issues that he has to tackle. He has to tackle the Ukraine issue. He has to tackle the issue of the US economy. And he has to tackle other matters which relate to the functioning of the White House and the presidency. And he's got a very strong test in 2026, because if he does badly in the intervening 1.5 years, then the Republicans are likely to lose control of both the Senate and the House. So that means he's going to be left with a lame duck administration for the final 2 years of his term. Now, the fact is, India under Prime Minister Modi can be of immense help in many ways. For example, the global south. For example, when we are talking in terms of the Ukraine conflict, because of his good relations with President Putin, there are many ways in which India can be helpful. And I think both Tulsi Gabbard as well as J.D. Vance, both of them are I mean, they have both met Prime Minister Modi and would have, to some extent, understood his mind and gauged his thinking. And they briefed President Trump on that. So my point is, will President Trump take a very narrow view, tariff, 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 or will he take a broader view and look at the whole gamut of issues that India is essential to, including the security of the Indo-Pacific, including security against terrorism and other matters, including, for example, ensuring the global south does not become a Chinese village, or the South China Sea does not anymore remain a Chinese lake, which is what unfortunately has become over the past 15 odd years. So I think if he looks at it from that angle, there are many issues on which he can rely on the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is very clear about many matters. For example, defense. I see immigration, of course, is not a problem. So long as they're Indian citizens, the government of India is ready to accept them. And that has been made very, very clear by no less a person than External Affairs Minister Jaishankar himself. As far as defense is concerned, if the United States defense companies were to situate some platforms in India, then they would be cost competitive. And very importantly, Vineet, we would like to have certain protocols in place, certain certain protocols to be signed, which will enable us to ensure access to the best in US technology, including in defense. The Russians are going all out to offer us the top class technology, the Su-57. It's a 5th generation aircraft. The Americans have tepidly offered us a 4.5th generation aircraft. The reality of the situation is, if we are in a position where we can argue for a 5th generation aircraft for the Navy, etc., and also for a full-fledged security relationship so that the Indo-Pacific is protected. So I think if Trump gets the big picture, he is going to be quite accommodative and reasonable. He accommodates Prime Minister Modi in some ways. He accommodates President Trump in other ways. That is the art of the deal. It's never one-sided. A one-sided deal is no deal at all. It's bound to have a very short life. So I think the question is wide angle or very narrow angle. And I would look at the next few meetings, I would say, to judge that. But if he looks at it from a wide angle, then certainly there's a lot on offer. And so far as defense is concerned, I don't think there's any problem in American defense companies situating in India and producing here as well. You can't just make everything in the United States, because then you're going to price it at a level that nobody is going to be able to afford it, least of all the US government, which is facing $38 trillion in debt. $38 trillion. And there are 18 ways in which one can describe the United States as almost bankrupt. So the question is, in what way President Trump will view this extremely important meeting with the most important partner he has in a range of issues, including peace and security. Thank you, Vinny.
Absolutely. Mr. Mittal, if you can hear me, I'll come to you now, sir. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Well, taking a leaf out of what Professor Nalapat also said, that Donald Trump is not somebody who's going to have a tunnel vision when it comes to our relationship with the Americans. He's obviously going to keep his own interest, the interest of the American people in mind. Of course, he's swearing by making America great again. We saw Elon Musk and J.D. Vance with those oversized hats in the White House just a few days ago, re-emphasizing the fact that America is a priority. But, making America a priority does not mean that India should not be one. Do you concur, sir?
Yes, that's true. I mean, the U.S. India partnership, it's not an alliance, but it's a partnership that has endured over the years through multiple administrations. We've had some bumps during the Biden administration, understandably, with the various things, the Adani case, the Pannu case, and generally the fact that the Biden admin was more on the left, and sort of did not like what they call the right-wing Indian government in general. But even then, there was a lot of friendship and amity. Prime Minister Modi was invited to a official state dinner. So I expect some of that amity to continue. Remember Howdy Modi from 2019, welcome Trump in Namaste Trump in 2020. So I expect a repeat of those kinds of shows of friendship and unity. I think on the tariff issue, it's going to be a continued bumpy road, but I think an accommodation is much more likely between India and the United States than other countries. Trump is not going to like BRICS because BRICS is really China. BRICS is really about China and Russia, and so those are not friendly and favorable conditions for America when it comes to making America great again. Same thing with the BRICS currency. I don't think India is going to accept the BRICS currency either, honestly, because that's going to be something dominated by China. And so, whatever bilateral relationships are going to happen, the talks that are going to happen today, they are mostly going to be agree on defense and probably tariffs. But I don't think it's going to be as negative of a relationship as it has been with Canada and the U.S., or Mexico and the U.S., or even Europe and the U.S. Basically, every country that Trump feels is taking advantage of. Yes, he said some negative things about India when it comes to the economic relationship, but that does not mean that ideologically he does not. He recognizes somebody in Prime Minister Modi who thinks like him, who's an independent thinker. He respects people who respect him, and also people who care more about their country than they care about some vague notion of international ideology, friendship and global friendship and those kind of things, which he thinks is a suspect way of cheating America on different kinds of things. India doesn't need things like USA. They don't need things like all the sort of left wing things that Elon Musk is trying to overturn in the American government. India has no need for that. India needs defense technology. It needs critical technology. I think a lot of those kind of things are going to be the focus of the talks today. And again, I think there's going to be continued meetings like this down the line through the years, and it's going to be a much more positive relationship than it has been in the last 4 years at least.
All right, valid points. Adrian, I hope you can hear me. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
All right,
yes, I can hear you.
it's important to understand what kind of a person Donald Trump is. Let's also put that into perspective, that he's an independent thinker. He does have a set of advisors, like every president and every leader does. But what has differentiated Donald Trump in terms of his presidential style, quote unquote, has been his independent thinking. And that's exactly something that India has also been known for, at least in the last 10 years, for our independent policy, regardless of what the world pressure or blocks may look like. Do you think this is perhaps creating or has created that conducive environment for, endless possibilities between these two nations?
Great question. And I've always thought that the relationship between the United States and India needed to be a lot tighter along defense policy, along economic policies. And Trump and Modi are very similar in many ways. They are independent thinkers. India, I was in the outsourcing industry, so I've been to India. I understand the country and see how it operates and how business operates and the ingenuity. And we see the same type of thing in the United States. It's always seemed to be a natural ally of ours. And on the economic front and independent thinking, with Trump, he is an independent thinker. There's no doubt about that. But if you see the people that he surrounds himself with, he's getting a lot of different views and a lot of different, it's not an echo chamber. He's getting differing viewpoints until he finally comes down with a certain policy. So I know a lot of people think he's making knee-jerk reactions here and there, but they're not. As far as the saber rattling with tariffs with other countries, I just don't see it with India. The relationship's too important. There should be focus on issues such as I would look at like reinstituting and start revisiting the IMEC corridor, which was promoted by Modi in 2023 at the G20. I would start looking at also the military aspect, the technology aspect, so that we are working in synergy and understanding that a long time ago, our focus should have been on India instead of and pushing business to India and working with India instead of pushing business to China, which ultimately has come back to hurt us and hurt India at the same time.
Absolutely, that's a solid point. Dr. Kohli, bringing you in now, of course, economically, India needs to get to that 5 trillion mark. India needs to become that third largest economy, and that is something that the Prime Minister has undertaken personally, right from Make in India to the digital revolution that India has seen and also exported to the rest of the world. Do you see synergies that India can offer to the Americans at this point in time if we are taking weaponry from them? What's that offer here from India to America?
Good evening, Vineet, and to all my fellow panelists and Newsx viewers. I think this meeting is happening in an extraordinary situation because I've never been so anticipatory on the meeting between the two leaders. There have been trips earlier as well. It's not that Prime Minister Modi is visiting America for the first time or he's meeting President Trump for the first time. But what has transpired over the last few weeks, I think this is one of the most anticipated meeting, I would say, especially with regard to the, I call the new economic situation as tarified. It's not terrified, it's tarified. So with regard to the tariffs and with regard to the deportations, with regard to the defense deal, with regard to the new geopolitical equations which are now realigning after President Trump took over. So I think it's a very, very different scenario, and Prime Minister Modi landing there at this point of time, it's a very, very crucial meeting. Yes, the message of $5 trillion economy, which is we're around the corner. We just about probably a couple of years ago, or maybe even less, from that mark. But I think it's not about the numbers. It's about business going forward. And so that we know President Trump is basically a business person. He means business. So it's both. He is a business person and he means business in whatever he does. Well, we've been hearing about statements morning, evening coming from him. I love when Adrian said that all of them are not knee-jerk reactions. That's, some of them may not be, But then eventually it settles down to reality. And whatever he's announced about the tariff for Mexico, for Canada, for China, and then talking about, India should moderate its own tariffs, I think they are all predetermined statements. I don't think those statements came to his mind after he became president. He was quite convinced from the time he was campaigning that he has to do this, and this is unfair. We cannot be exporting something and you impose tariffs, and we can be importing something where we're putting, like, for example, the Indian tariffs. I was taking out the average of all that we export, Vineet, to America. And, the average tariff came somewhere between 14 to 17%. And I did the same exercise for what comes from America as well. The average was 3 to 4%. So I think that's what is counting in the mind of President Trump, that there is a difference of about 10% odd in the two-way trade which happens, and he feels this should be a level playing field. And we should not forget that America today is India's largest trading partner. It's overtaken China, for that matter, $130 billion plus. Also, what's counting on President Trump's mind is, the negative trade balance which America has with India, or if I put it the other way around, India has a positive trade balance with America. I think he also wants an equalizer kind of a thing where whatever we export, we import. It should be a level playing field. I think that's what he's targeting. I don't know if that's possible or not immediately, but then that'll also be on the table. So I think it's going to be a very tough call as far as the tariffs are concerned. We saw in the Indian budget recently, which came on 1st of February, that tariffs on some of the products were reduced in anticipation of this meeting coming up. I'm sure Prime Minister Modi has gone with a very open mind. And if there is a stalemate, or if things come to a standstill where the dialogue doesn't move forward, Prime Minister Modi is quite prepared to moderate. I'm sure that he's carrying the list of items which do carry a little more lopsided tariffs than what America, exports to India and vice versa, both ways. So I think there is a tick box kind of a list which is there in his pocket, and I'm sure that'll be the point of discussion on deportations. I think minus the handcuffs and the chains and a military aircraft flying to the country, we are fine with taking back the people who've gone illegitimately. I mean, no country, even if they've gone from the country, would like its citizens to be landing up somewhere without legitimate documents and without legitimate entry permits. So we're fine to take them back. I think it's the military aircraft which is not needed. They don't need to be chained. In an aircraft, you don't expect to be running around here and there. They'll obviously be landing here. We're fine with taking back those people, and we've already spoken about that. But I think we should not forget that there were days when India needed America more than America needed India. But I think times have changed with it now. America needs India as much as India needs America, if not more. I think we are living in those times. So I'm sure President Trump, whatever dialogue that happens in a few hours from now, is going to be, around that thought process. And I'm sure there's this, although I did use the word stalemate, but I'm sure it's not going to be there because the position India holds as of today is of utmost importance, whether it's global south, whether it is South Asia. Well, they're already loggerheads with China because of the trade tariffs which have been imposed. So not a very hunky-dory relationship with China. And America cannot afford to have the similar kind of relationship with India. So you need to have one very good friend out there in that part of the geography. So I think I'm looking forward very positively to this whole dialogue. The interaction is going to be very, very positive. I'm expecting a very solid defense deal, which will probably come out. I'm expecting some kind of solution on the tariffs, or some kind of compromise from both the sides, and a very forward-looking bilateral trade in the years to come. There's tremendous possibility there. We should not forget that some of the finest minds in America are Indians, whether they're CEOs or beneath.
Absolutely. Manga Anantmula, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, ma'am, appreciate you joining us. Well, taking a leaf out of what Dr. Kohli said, well, Donald Trump is surrounded by people of Indian origin. Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, Mr. Ramaswamy, and of course, his recent most opponent, Kamala Harris, also half Indian. Does that have any bearing on any president? Obviously, there is a soft corner for those people who are a part of the government towards India. But the fact of the matter is that will, the thought or rather the agenda of America first in any way halt or sort of impede the progress that both these great democracies have made over the last few years?
Well, Donald Trump is a different kind of a leader that any country would love him to have him as their president. I think talk about Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, or even J.D. Vance, his choice for vice president candidate. I mean, he has done a phenomenal job picking, and I think he not only picked them just because of their ethnic background. Not only that, he loves Hindus. He has made that clear several times that his relationship with Modi ji and India, and also his relationship with Hindus, has always been a very good relationship, and he would love to have Hindus on his cabinet, and he's keeping up to his end of the promise. And I do not see anybody else making such tall promises and keeping them. But for Donald Trump, I don't think Tulsi Gabbard would have been the pick for national intelligence security, and Kash Patel for FBI. And they are just not good Hindu Americans. They are the real patriots of American society, and they have served in US military. And that's the beauty of President Donald Trump bringing these folks on board. And he has excellent advisors now with Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, and there are several others who are good advisors on trade policies and on national issues and defense partnership with India. Probably they will have a dialogue about that too. I've been hearing that a little bit in the background. I can confirm, but I think that is the very high possibility that those dialogues will be happening. And also, the tariffs are the real important reason why President Trump and Prime Minister Modi will have a great dialogue. Definitely, as most of the panelists said, US and China, that relationship is going nowhere. We are not in that happy marriage, and that's going to break, and it's almost broken. And there is definitely going to be better opportunities and chances for India to flourish and get a major portion of the economic ties that President Trump would love to have. And I think this is one of the best meetings I'm looking forward to, because for me it's America first Trump and Bharat first Narendra Modi ji, and I think these are the two best democratic leaders. And I think let's hope for what we are going to get out of that meeting at 4 p.m. We are just all looking forward to. Probably they will have a happy marriage about the tariffs, as most panelists said, and there will be some give and there will be some take on both ends. But I think both will work out some good medium. And immigration policies is another thing that President Trump would want to bring up while Prime Minister Modi is there. Just not the illegal immigrants. And there are a lot of H1 issues that we have that we want to address, and probably that is one of the topic that Prime Minister Modi, I'm thinking he will definitely bring it up, because that's a very hot topic back home for us also. So let's hope we'll have a lot more good news in another maybe 8 hours to come. So let's keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best.
All right, fair enough. Ambassador Sachdev, so your thoughts on this important bilateral meet that is about to take place between these two great leaders. Well, Donald Trump says that if you're going to be imposing higher taxes on our products, then obviously we will do the same. And he says this is a fair way to trade. But every country has its own unique set of challenges, and thus some of these taxes are spelled out. Is it basically arm twisting other countries into submitting to a tax which perhaps may not be conducive to the internal economy of that particular country? How do you view this tug of war, and do you think that Donald Trump has to be consistent in terms of his expectations on these tariffs with every country? If they relent towards India like they did when it came to the S-400s, then of course the president himself will not be taken seriously.
Well,
no, this is for Ambassador Sachdev, ma'am. This is for Ambassador Sachdev. I apologize. Ambassador Sachdev, this is for you, sir.
Thank you. I wanted to defer to Madam Manga. But anyway, I think you've raised a very important question, and let me begin by saying that internationally, this meeting makes a rather different context. If you notice, people who have met Mr. Trump since his second inauguration, it was Israeli Prime Minister, it was Japanese Prime Minister, and Indian Prime Minister follows Jordanian King. So it's leaving aside Jordanian King, which has Gaza-related context. It shows that there is certain gradation in those meetings. Friends are being called for first. No European PM or president or king has ever been invited so far. Secondly, trade-wise, which tends to be a big-ticket item, our trade with the United States makes us 10th largest trading partner with that country, while US remains largest trading partner of India. Service sector-wise, we are nearly at par, but commodity trade well, we do have $40 billion worth of trade surplus. Now, this surplus is minuscule as compared to what Mexico, Canada, and China have, which would be sometimes 10 times higher, sometimes 5 times higher than this figure. So let's put it in perspective. I think uh, Mr. Trump would, in ideal world, would like us to trade equally or have a surplus from United States, but he is realist enough not to expect it all the time, every year. Secondly, one would also like to remind our viewers that after the first call between the Prime Minister and President, uh, soon after taking over, the readout from the White House stated that President Trump wanted India to buy more oil and more weapon systems. Both are open doors. India is world's third largest importer of crude, and we need more crude. And that could be an easy fit to balance the trade. Weapon system wise, we have been diversifying,
Right, sir.
and it would not be too difficult for us, provided the technology and the price are right. And the way Americans have been taking part in Aero India, which began earlier this week in Bangalore, where 35 and other state-of-the-art weapon systems being on display, I think there is plenty that can be expected.
Uh-huh.
Now, these summits are well prepared in advance, and I don't think we would have been the third prime minister to meet Mr. Trump if he was to issue a counterintuitive call on tariffs and or scold us in public or have a public spat. I think the context is quite benign, and I am optimistic about the way it will pan out in few hours' time. Thank you.
General Kocher, well, there's going to be a talk of sale and purchase, or rather mostly sale of defense equipment as well. And that's a huge area that the Americans can profit from. Do you think that something as trivial as tariffs would get into the way of that?
If you breathe at times, being the last speaker has its own advantages. So I can actually cover what has not been covered. So you are absolutely right. The purchase list.
So there was a pun in my question to you. Obviously, I was being sarcastic.
Okay.
Donald Trump, is a businessman. He's an astute businessman.
Yeah.
He's not going
Yes,
to,
yes.
what's that saying? Pound foolish and penny wise.
It's like this, Vineet. When your national interests converge, then you will find that there is a more bonding with each other. So once we talk about Indo-US relations, and right from 2016, there has been an upswing because we are the major defense partner of the United States, and we have been elevated to a strategic trade authorization tier 1 status. So we have to take this thing into this context, because in case we have to talk about defense, your agreements don't happen overnight. There is a lot of homework done already. Rajnath Singh and his counterpart in the US have already met, and a broad agreement on what India is willing to buy from the United States has already been arrived at. So the important areas are where these trials are already happening in India: the Striker combat vehicle, the Javelin missiles, anti-tank missiles. These trials are already taking place in India. And what my information is that these trials have been positive, accepted by the Indian Army. So what we expect now is these deals, apart from the NQ-9B drones and their MRO facilities, which is going to be established in India, the US would also be getting these orders, and that is going to nullify to a large extent the tariff issue, because I think tariff is actually gaining the prominence because Trump is using that as a weapon, but I don't think he is going to use it against India to that extent, because the Indians have already done their homework. They have a list of more than 30 items which are going to be given to Trump, stating that we are reducing a tariff on these 30 plus items. So the starting point, if you start on a positive note, on negotiation, you will find the agreements also actually happening. So what we are looking for right now is that energy trade in terms of medium and small moderate nuclear reactors for our power plants, because the US has already taken out 3 of our organizations from the banned list. So it is now going to fructify in an agreement on the energy sector. We talked about crude oil, that is on the anvil. We talked about the tariff also, it is on the anvil, and the defense. And most important I would like to talk about is our fighter aircraft, the 5th or the 6th generation F-35 aircraft, because United States is keen that India buys this aircraft. That is why in the Aero Show, this aircraft was demonstrated along with the Su-57. And what reports I am getting after the Aero Show is that it's a very, very versatile aircraft. Air Force is absolutely, will not have any objection in actually buying it. And when we have listened to the Air Chief on our desperate need to make up the deficiencies of our 12 squadrons, I think, this is my personal assessment, I think at least 2 squadrons for F-35 should be on the anvil. We can still go to Su-57 and also get 2 squadrons from Russia. So that will actually give us a balance. And this balance is required because if we have to make up this deficiency, we can't wait for 40 years. And considering the way the adversaries are arming themselves with technology, I think this would be there. And my last point is on transfer of technology, because this is one gray area with the United States. In spite of the ISET, I think the ISET will have to be reviewed, because the ISET has not been followed in letter and spirit by the United States so far. The jet engines G404 and 414, we are still to get the consignments into India, and our Tejas project has been delayed. So I think this would be one area which will be stressed by Prime Minister Modi here. We have to push this thing through, especially the transfer of technology, because France is ready to give, Russia is ready to give. So why not the United States?
Right, you're
so
absolutely right, sir. And that has been a pain point, hasn't it been, Professor Nalapat, for India? But the fact of the matter is that let's also look at some of the things that Trump has said before his election as the president about India and about the problems that he thinks that need to be addressed. He also called India, Professor Nalapat, a very big abuser on trade. His top economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, singled out a country, which is India, as having enormously high tariffs in an interview to CNBC. In fact, last month only, Donald Trump called India, Brazil and China as countries that mean us harm. Obviously, there is a problem there. Do you think the Prime Minister is going to be able to grab the bull by the horns and make Donald Trump see the light at the end of this tunnel?
Look, Vineet, I'll tell you why I am optimistic. There is a difference between China and India. I don't know if the economic advisor whom you talked about understands it, but certainly President Trump does. And may I point out that he has, look at the way he has dismantled USAID. Look at what USAID has been doing in India, promoting civil strife, creating mischief. All kinds of activities have been promoted by USAID, and that is being dismantled. I mean, it can be refashioned, but it's being dismantled. I think that's a plus for India. Now, look at Bangladesh, look at Pakistan. Trump has been very forthright about Bangladesh. Not at all like his predecessor. He is very forthright about Pakistan. He doesn't share the belief in Pakistan's government that the IMF chief seems to have, for example. So I think these are examples that show he is correctly aligned on geopolitics in a very, very sharp way. And secondly, Vineet, I can tell you that his prescription of drill, baby, drill, oil, shale oil, whatever, that's fine in the short run. But in the long run, it will not work. And fusion energy, for example, will be a magic wand. If you unlock fusion energy through technology utilizing thorium, you are getting limitless, almost limitless power at a very low cost. India and the United States can collaborate to ensure that we together outpace the Chinese. The Chinese are making a desperate effort to catch up on fusion technology and surpass the US. Some reports say that they have already done so. Look at, for example, artificial intelligence. The Chinese are again making a desperate effort. And they're not making a desperate effort with good intentions. They're making a desperate effort so that they have the strength to take on and cripple democracies such as the US and India, which is why there's very great need for the two biggest democracies to work together. And I mean, you look at the way the world is changing. Look at drones, for example. Yes, I mean, platforms like fighter aircraft are very, very important. And certainly at the air show, a lot of them were featured. But increasingly now, we are relying on drones. And in that situation, the high technology drones, again, it's a field where the Chinese are working night and day. Now, they talk about some, AI system, some open thing, which they say they developed $5 million. What they hide is the fact they spend more than $20 billion stealing technologies from the US in order to ensure the building of that particular model. So essentially, that 5 million is the tip of the iceberg of the actual expenditure incurred by China. Now, I think AI is a very important field. Fusion energy is a very, very important field. Drones are a very important field. And India is totally with President Trump on the control of illegals, provided they are Indian citizens. That's a very, 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 very rational and reasonable stand. And may I point out, IMEC, the India-Europe corridor, which was Prime Minister Modi's idea, it's a very important way of destroying the Belt and Road Initiative. Trump is, of course, dismantling it in his own way. Panama is the latest country to withdraw from the Belt and Road. But look at the IMEC. It's an ideal way in which it can be dismantled. So I can say very clearly, Vineet, the congruences are much more than the differences. And President Trump has not got where he has got, the level of success he's achieved in business, and despite every effort made to send him to jail, they failed. So obviously, he's got an amazing, an amazing practical IQ. So I would like to say, Vineet, I am optimistic about our relationship because we both need each other in this situation to take on the threat facing both of us, which is the rapid, progress made by China in technologies that can be highly destructive to the democracies and highly constructive if democracies have them. Thank you, Vineet.
Right, absolutely. Great points. I'm going to go back to Mr. Mittal. Mr. Mittal, in fact, Donald Trump had made, similar tariffs or introduced similar tariffs in his first tenure as well, which was from 2017 to 2021. There were duty-free concessions which were made to Canada and Mexico as well. Joe Biden came along right after that and extended this to countries like Japan, Britain, and the European Union as well. But when it came to steel and aluminium, Donald Trump introduced yet again what he had done in his first term as well. In 2018, after he introduced these tariffs, the manufacturing jobs related to steel and aluminium in the United States fell down. Now, this is a set precedent that Donald Trump has suffered in the past. Why do you think he would want to do something like this again? And this is also a loss for India, because India will have to find newer markets when it comes to steel and aluminium. Of course, the percentage of our exports to the United States is very little, but it is still going to be a loss for our producers.
Yeah, I think it's a pain point. I think it's a pain point on both countries. I think President Trump, like I said, has always wanted to emphasize moving manufacturing and industrial jobs in critical industries like steel back to the United States, and I think he's going to continue focusing on that. The hope is that this time the pain from the tariffs is not as harsh as it was last year, or sorry, in the last administration. And I think he has learned a lot. I think, like I said, some of the rhetoric is still continuing, but I think it's more. My understanding is it's going to be more about the art of the deal than sort of actual trying to hurt other countries or trying to sort of make all kinds of wild, impossible deals or tariffs. So I think that's where Donald Trump is coming from. On the overall tariffs issue, I mean, I think, look, Elon Musk obviously wants to sell Tesla in India, so I think there's going to be a lot of that. Harley's, American industry wants to enter the Indian market. Big tech wants to enter the Indian market. They already have Google and Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram are already prominent. They want to continue dominating that market. They want the billion, Indian users who are going to be coming into, who are going to be using, mobile phones and American technology. They want that continued. They don't want the Great Firewall of China. So I think there's going to be a lot of give and take on both sides when it comes to tariffs and critical technologies. And I think, like I said, most likely on things like steel and manufacturing, there's going to be some continued bumps along the road, but they're going to be much more solvable than they are for countries like China, where they produce millions of tons of steel that goes rotting in Chinese storehouses because the government, the Communist Party mandates that steel has to be produced for China. So that kind of action isn't going to happen on the American or the Indian side.
Absolutely. And Adrian, but there is an elephant in the room, or should I call it the big dragon in the room that America needs to tame, and it's only possible, if you're gonna feed the lion, which is India, or the tiger, and that is something that Donald Trump definitely recognizes. There is a balancing act that Donald Trump wishes to in fact initiate. He feels that previous Democratic governments, including the one that President Obama ran for 8 years, were heavily lopsided towards benefiting China, and that has in turn created problems for America. They need to fix that. They need to correct that, and without India, it's not possible.
Absolutely. And the most important thing about these meetings is that the decisions that are being made, and when they go through the decisions that are being made, that they're not, once you make that decision or you put pressure here, it's not pushing you into the arms of an adversary. It's not pushing you in the arms of the Islamic Republic of Iran for something. It's not pushing you in the arms of Russia. It's not pushing you in the arms of China. It needs to be a situation where there is a level of understanding that we need to work together, because there is a world order right now that is collaborating, working on all fronts against the world's largest democracy, which is India, as well as the United States. And India is the counterbalance to China in the region on many levels. And we need to decouple our relationship from China as much as possible and start shifting that to India. This is something that should have been done a long time ago. But the Democrat presidencies that we've seen have had a tendency since, I'll go back to the Obama administration, of tilting regions such as the Middle East in the wrong direction, tilting the Indo-Pacific in the wrong direction, instead of strong policies that help India and that are mutually beneficial, that help India push back against China and don't push India into the arms of China or into the arms of Russia, where they're we look at the oil consumption and the tariffs put on Russian oil. India is going to work under its best interest and import that oil because they're selling it so cheap. But there's a way around that. Drill, baby, drill was mentioned. Make U.S. oil a resource. Make U.S. oil a resource. Work together, not against each other.
Absolutely. Great points, Adrian. In fact, we have completely run out of time. I just want to get a quick 20-second reaction from Dr. Kohli as well. Dr. Kohli, there have been some concessions made when it comes to Tesla, when it comes to Harley Davidson bikes, when it comes to Apple components, and these are of course cuts which seem to be accommodating Donald Trump's stance. But the finance minister went on to say that these were done independently. These were done to boost India's economy and to increase consumption. 20-second reaction from you on that, Dr. Kohli, then we take a break.
Well, absolutely, Vineet. We could afford to do it on those products, but I picked up an example of an agricultural product. Now, India being predominantly an agriculture economy, we cannot afford to allow agricultural products to be freely flowing into the country. So we have to be protective. I think this is what President Trump needs to understand. A very important and a quick point, Vineet, is I think President Trump will have to look at the US inflation numbers while imposing these tariffs, because we already saw last evening the numbers shooting up. And if these tariffs keep happening, I'm sure there's going to be a problem with the American economy, which has barely been able to come out of the inflation bubble, I would say, which was there for ever since COVID for various reasons. So I think President Trump will have to balance things out, in terms of the domestic economy as well.
All right. Appreciate everybody who joined us. Thank you so much. Our rolling coverage towards this important meeting is going to continue. We'll be right back after these short messages.